Yeah, Matthew is one of the founders of Coltura, which is a national organization that does EV, works on EV legislation and education and things like that. Mostly or completely at the state level, but still a national organization. And I'll have Matthew talk a little bit more about what they do.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks, Julia. Thank you for inviting me to speak today. I'm again Matthew Metz, co-executive director of Coltura, and here I got a few slides I'll put on here. My slideshow. Let's see, you guys. Okay. So Coltura, actually, we're not technically an EV organization. Our mission is to improve climate, health, and equity by accelerating the shift beyond gasoline to clean alternatives. So in most cases, that means electric vehicles, but we do whatever we can to reduce gasoline consumption as fast as possible. So we have really three methods that we use to do that. Our name Coltura, what the heck does that mean? And so it kind of came out of the idea that we need to change the culture around the use of CO2. And so we started out actually doing as more of a cultural organization that focused on that issue on gasoline and trying to educate the public, because at that time, it just didn't seem, when we started in 2014, there wasn't like an open track to really pushing electric vehicles very fast. And then starting in 2017, we started getting more involved in policy. We saw that in Europe, the countries there were enacting kind of gas car phase outs, or some would say bans, in 2030, 2035, 2040. Different countries were doing it, but no one was talking about doing that in the United States. So we wrote actually the first op-eds favoring that. We started working, especially in California, on helping sponsor the first legislation to phase out gas cars. At that time, it was 2040. The bill sponsor wanted to do, and then did a number of things in California that eventually kind of morphed into what's now known as the ACC2 regulation, which is a regulation that would effectively phase out the sale of new gas cars by 2035, with pretty sharp ramp up between now and 2035. It would require, I think, 68% of new cars to be electric by 2030. And so I don't know how much you guys know about California auto regulation, but other states have the ability to adopt that regulation, and a number of states are doing that right now. Whether Colorado is going to do it is an interesting question. I don't think it's been decided yet. Anyway, so that was a big initiative in Washington State. We thought, well, 2035 is not quite fast enough. So Washington has actually committed itself to a goal of 2030. We got legislation through in Washington that require the state to prepare for 100% new car being electric by 2030. And the state's taking it seriously. Like they're bringing the entire government together and thinking, what are all the different aspects that we need to have in place for everyone to have a great experience with an EV by 2030, even if 100% of the new cars on the road coming onto the road are EVs by then. And it's a lot of work. So Washington State is actually working through that. And then the other aspect you see on the triangle there is data. So in the last year and a half, we've been getting more deeply into the data around gasoline usage. It was kind of prompted by the understanding that even if we did these phase outs, that wouldn't be fast enough. And as we're going to talk about, it's really important to get the people that are using the most gasoline first. And so we started really trying to understand with great granularity how gasoline is being used, and just energy of light duty vehicles generally. And even though gasoline is $1 trillion market, the data at the consumer level, like how consumers are actually using data, has never really been developed very much. You know, you can figure it out. You can go and consult from the federal government and see like how much gasoline is sold by the refineries in your state. But once you get more granular, you can't really see it. And you know, surprisingly, that also goes for EVs. Is that like how the energy use of EVs is distributed also is not very well understood yet. So we've been diving into that analysis, and I'm going to just share a little bit about that with you today. So you guys are probably familiar with this, that gasoline is really one of the top sources of US emissions. The transportation sector generally is the leading source with about 27% of emissions. That's at the US level. I think in Colorado it's probably even higher. And in light duty vehicles, about the largest chunk of that, about 57%. Nationwide, gasoline counts for 18% of all carbon emissions. In Washington State, where I live, it's about a quarter. Colorado, you know, and it's kind of a moving target. In Colorado, I'm not sure where you guys are, probably around 20%. But as you know, you have very aggressive goals for renewables in your power sector. And so as the power sector gets greener, and it looks like it's on track to get greener much faster than the autos there, then you know, that's share of carbon emissions coming from light duty vehicles is likely to grow unless, you know, very aggressive action is taken with EVs. Yeah, and so just generally this is gasoline consumption since 1990, and as you see, it's just been basically pretty much a flat line, except for, you know, the COVID year of 2020 where there's a little dip, but we're pretty much right back where we were roughly. It all kind of adds, there's different ways of counting, but it adds up to about 140 billion gallons a year, and we've been very, very stable. So even though automobiles are getting more fuel efficient, there's more of them on the road, and we're driving them, you know, more miles. So it's basically a draw. So you know, the UN, the Biden administration, you know, Biden have said, hey, look, we got to cut carbon emissions 50% by 2030. And if you look at this chart, you know, it's not terribly encouraging, like at least from the auto sector. Like it doesn't look like there's any trend at all, except flat. So but we've kind of put that as our challenge, is to figure out a way in the United States to really start cutting carbon emissions very fast from light duty vehicles. And actually our goal is to achieve that 50% reduction. So one insight that we've had is that really to cut gasoline use faster, we need to switch the biggest gasoline users to EVs first. And so this is a graph showing kind of dividing all the drivers in the US up into chunks of 10%. Those are called deciles. And we're dividing them by their gasoline consumption. So these guys over here are called gasoline super users, and so they're the top 10% in terms of consumption, and they use 32% of all gasoline. So the top 10% uses 32%. That's more than the bottom 60% combined, and the top 20% use almost 50%. So you know, if you get someone like this that's a super user to switch to an EV, that's like almost 3 times, or it can be 4 times as much benefit as just someone, you know, in the middle or lower levels. And unfortunately, I'm not sure if that's, yeah. And so a super user, this is the curve of super users. This is actually by percentiles. And so super users start at around 1,000 gallons a year, and they go up from there. So yeah, and some people are using 2,500, 3,000 gallons a year. I mean, just crazy, but it starts at about 1,000. The 50th percentile is, I think, around 450 gallons a year. And so the biggest driver of gasoline consumption is driving. So the super users, they drive about 30,000 miles a year, 3 times the average of other drivers. So yeah, so in general, the amount of driving you do for super users, the amount of driving is about 3/4 of the factor that causes them to become a super user. It's the most important one. And super users are most likely to live in rural areas. So you can see like 33% of super users live in rural areas compared to 26% for regular drivers. Urban areas are a little bit less likely to be super users than urban areas, but pretty much all areas have super users, but yeah, again, more concentration in rural areas, a lot of times on the kind of the fringes of large metro areas. There's a lot of super users. And then the other aspect of super using is fuel efficiency. So super users, they tend to drive SUVs and pickups, so about 64%, and they're less likely to drive cars, whereas other drivers are more likely to drive cars and less, the pickups and SUVs. We looked at the super users from a lot of different angles. So what was kind of interesting is that income is not an important determinant of whether you're a super user or not. Pretty much at all levels of income, it's pretty much the same between super users and the regular population. Let's see, EV drivers, though, who are now coming here on the green, they tend to have much higher incomes than the ordinary population. So and this is, I think, slowly starting to change, but this was the trend from the survey. But what that means is that because the super users are kind of spread among different income levels, well, then the people at the lower levels of income are paying a lot more money of their household income towards gasoline. And so there's different ways of measuring, but yeah, this is at $5 a gallon and 100 gallons a month, which is kind of the situation in California now and in Washington. In Colorado, your gas is probably a little cheaper now, but you can see like it can be up to like 30% of income, 20% of income, and there's a lot of people that are spending hundreds of thousands in California spending 20% of their income on gasoline, and then plus another 15% on maintenance. And so it's extremely challenging for a lot of people. And you can understand the political volatility of gas prices if you're spending 20% or 25% of your income on gasoline, all of a sudden price of gas goes up 25%. That has a huge impact on people's families. And so we did analysis in California of just that share of income spent on gasoline, and so for super users, for under 25,000, they're spending about 30% of their income. This mid-range 25 to 50, 22%. So it's a very high levels of expenditure. And then in maintenance, actually, we've been looking into maintenance. So maintenance is also a very, very high source of expenditure, especially as cars get older. When a car gets over about 100,000 miles, as the majority of cars on the road are have over 100,000 miles, they start to get very expensive to maintain, and it's gets to be something like 15-20 cents a mile, $3,000, $4,000 a year. And for super users, because they're driving so many miles, these maintenance expenses go extremely high. And so again, here's someone, let's say 25 to 50,000 spending 14% of their income. And going back to this one, we'll just add it up. And then here's another 22%. So just on their car, just fueling and maintaining their car is like over a third of their household income. So it's a very very severe burden on families. So now I'm going to pivot a little bit and just talk about from an emission standpoint, what it means to determine who shifts to an EV. So right now, kind of the assumption, people haven't been paying too much attention to who shifts to an EV. Just every EV on the road, well, that's great, and we need to get more. And largely I agree with that. But in terms of carbon emissions, it makes a huge difference who is shifting to an EV. Because if, let's say, you just lined up the 100, or this is like 100 million biggest users of gasoline first, biggest users of gasoline, and you shifted them all the way to an EV, you would need 100 million vehicles to achieve a 50% emissions cut. Note that that's also counting like for the grid and stuff. So this is actually like a 65% cut in gasoline, because we're counting like the electricity, as well, like the carbon in that electricity. So anyway, we need about 100 million. If all drivers switched equally, like super users just as likely as someone else to switch, we would need to turn over 170 million cars to achieve that 50% emissions cut. And if the biggest gasoline users switch to EVs last, we would need about 230 million vehicles to switch to become EVs. And right now, like I think in 2022 we're on track, I think, to sell just under 1 million EVs. And and I think our total vehicle production, including gas cars right now, is about 15 million vehicles a year. And so you can just see how challenging it's going to be to achieve the kind of the emission cuts we need if we, well, under any circumstance, but especially if we're kind of slow at switching these biggest users to gasoline, to EVs first. So yeah, so we first introduced this concept last year. We wrote a report, and it took a little while to get going, but it's actually been starting to get a lot of traction in different places. We got a lot of press coverage. JP Morgan picked it up in their annual energy paper. So there's been a lot of really interesting writing about it. But that work was based on a federal transportation survey, and is also from 2017, so it's a little bit outdated now. So we've been we've been getting some new data sources that have never been used before. So we got a lot of like vehicle registration and smog check records from the state of California, and I think about 60 million records. And we've been kind of doing big data analysis on them. And those records, by the way, have odometer readings. So for any vehicle, let's say a vehicle is bought with 20,000 miles, then 3 years later gets a smog check and has 80,000 miles, and then then it's sold 2 years later and has 110,000 miles. Well, by just taking that increment of mileage and dividing it by the miles per gallon of the car and the time factor, we can figure out, well, how many gallons of gasoline is this car using a year? And so then we've got that, and then we're able to map it to the zip code level. So what you see here is a map of California, mapped to the well, this is actually, I should say, the Bay Area, mapped to the zip code level. So you can see here, for example, this is Silicon Valley here, Palo Alto, and Sunnyvale, Apple and Computer, all that, San Jose, these areas. So these have pretty light levels of super users. These actually, as you guys probably know, these are also the highest levels of EV drivers in the country. So, and then as you get outside in these areas, this is Central Valley, California, Gilroy, these areas right here, these have pretty high levels of like 10 to 20, even some have like 20 to 25. As you get further out, people may be commuting to the Bay Area, then you have extreme high levels of super users, like 25% of the people are super users. And again, just to remind you guys, so 10%, remember how I divided that up in deciles? So super users are 10% of the population. So if an area has 25% of super users, that means they have 2.5 times kind of like the average number of super users in their area. And so we're able to get really granular with the data. So so this is an area, Los Banos, California. So here I'll just show you back on the map. So Los Banos is down here. It's about 70 miles southeast of San Jose. And so we think that this type of area would be a really, might be a really interesting one to target, because while the income is kind of low, it has a lot of single family homes, which means it's pretty easy for people just to plug in and charge. You don't have the difficulties that you have in like urban apartment buildings of getting home charging. They have high number of super users, 26%. 60% of the super users drive small and mid-sized cars, so it's not there's a lot of EV offerings in those small and mid-sized areas. So anyway, so we're able to look at this with a lot of granularity and kind of find these areas for targeting that could be really excellent. One thing that I think even a lot of the EV drivers don't know is that it's actually, if you're a super user, if you're a big driver, it's actually cheaper almost under most circumstances, especially in California where the gas prices are high, just to trade in your old gas car and get a new EV. And it turns out even on a monthly payments basis, like you'll save money every month. And so this is just a cost comparison here. So this is a high driver. So it's 33,000 miles a year. So let's say he was in a Civic. So he would spend $475 on fuel, $412 on maintenance. And so his monthly cost just for fuel and maintenance would be about $887. And so if he traded in for a brand new Bolt, yeah, the fuel cost would go down $193, maintenance as well, and sure, he would have a car payment, but all combined is less. And so he's got so instead of having like a old car with 100 something thousand miles on it, it's starting to break down, he gets a brand new car that is worth a lot more, and he's paying less on it per month. So it's actually a really good deal. And so that means that there's a lot of opportunity to shift these super users over to EVs. Yeah, and so as I say, we've just been developing this gasoline data for a lot of different purposes, but to try to figure out ways like how can we accelerate this conversion of these big users to EVs. What are the different incentives, the auto financing things, the marketing aspects, the grid upgrades. There's a lot of different aspects to understanding this data and organizing coalition building. One thing also is kind of interesting is that by understanding how vehicles use energy in a given area, it has really interesting implications for the grid. For example, if there's an area with a lot of super users, well, then that means that when the sort of next gen grid upgrades are being done, you need to size the grid to take more energy, because these people are charging their 40, 50 kilowatt hours a day to fill their vehicles. So that that's a huge draw on the grid. Conversely, areas that where there's a lot of people, EV drivers that are low utilization, that only as they drive their use 4 kilowatt hours a day or something like that, that means that they have there's a lot of extra battery resource for the grid, and that there can be a lot of storage there. So understanding in great granularity how the energy use works has a lot of pretty interesting implications. So this is just kind of what Coltura is doing on this. So we have a map tool. You guys kind of saw a sneak preview of it, of just like very great granularity on it. And we're working to get this not just for California, but for the entire country. So we hope to have that capability by next year. Just developing the data center, like really getting deep into the different aspects of vehicle energy usage, and also the economics and the financial expenditures around that. And then also we have kind of a calculator tool so that a lot of people have calculator tools, but we have a pretty slick one that will help people understand their savings for shifting to EVs, with particular attention on super users. Okay, well, anyway, that's my presentation. Thanks for listening. Just happy to answer any questions that you guys have.
Yeah, where do you get your funding?
So we get it from both a foundation that works on these issues, and also just from private donors. Like, we started out just with private donors, still probably half of it, just mostly environmentalists or people concerned about the environment. And as is our funder, which is Zero Now Fund, which is actually kind of a consortium of some of the larger funders like Hewlett Foundation and Climate Works and people like that.
That's great.
Someone here a while back, and they said that in the big cities in the summertime, when everyone's running their air conditioner and they have brownouts because the power plants just can't keep up, what are we going to do when we put a whole bunch of electric vehicles on the grid and they're getting brownouts already?
Yeah, well, I mean, that's kind of interesting question, because what I would say there is like, it actually could have a great energy resource, especially typically like the times when there's the most demand on the grid is, let's say, 4 to 6 p.m. right when people are coming home, they blast the air conditioner. But a lot of times, especially in those areas where there's a lot of EVs, there's a lot of additional energy storage capacity. So that actually could help mitigate that. And in many cases, as long as the people are charging at a time when the draw on the grid isn't that great. So we need to get better and better at managing our charging times, and I think we are.
Well, I have a Tesla. My Tesla has a clock on it as to when I could charge, and I always charge between midnight, whatever I was finished. Excel, who is our power company in Denver, has taken over my charger, and I'm shocked that at some nights I get home at 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock and plug in, and it immediately starts to charge, because Excel says we've got more power to burn at this particular time, so we're going to charge your car at that time. Last night they took it at 1 o'clock, I think, and finished at 1:45. I don't go very far, to the In-N-Out burger and back. Yeah, but I'm amazed at because they've hit all different time slots throughout the night. Their guarantee is that my car will be charged by 6 o'clock in the morning, and they tell me what time they charge and what time they finish charging.
Yeah, it's interesting, but they still are not like drawing from vehicle like batteries, right? Like it's just a one way, like that they're not using you guys to to supplement the power at times of shortage.
No,
Right,
it's
and-
not. I'm on that program too. No, it's not vehicle to grid, unfortunately. But yeah, it's just the opposite. It's just half of the equation.
Yeah, I don't know if anyone is doing that. I mean, I think there's some experimental things going on, but especially with Tesla, I don't know even if Tesla has Tesla approved that, like vehicle to grid?
I don't think it has the. I don't think the vehicles are actually. They would have to do some hardware changes to make vehicle to grid. I mean, maybe they are now and they're not telling us, but somebody looked at it a while ago and there was some, I mean, I don't know what the mechanics were, but the hardware couldn't support it. The car couldn't support it.
Yeah. So yeah, it's still that's still a little few years off probably.
But Matthew, I was kind of thinking when you were talking about how even EV owners don't realize how much money they're saving each month. especially on fueling. So I was kind of thinking, incentives are kind of a weird thing because they're kind of psychological in a sense. So it's not necessarily the amount of money you spend, it's more how much it motivates the person. So I was wondering whether, as far as incentives go, instead of like having, I don't know, money off the car or something like that, you could do like free public charging or something like that, and then people would go, oh my god, I'm spending all this money on gas, and look, I can get it free or discounted or whatever. I just wonder whether you could get more interest with less money doing that. I mean, the disadvantage is, I guess, it encourages people to drive, which isn't good, but even with an EV.
Yeah, I mean, that's interesting. We actually just finished a survey. We haven't even really analyzed it yet, and of super users and like what would help be most important for you to switch and stuff. And I think that was a question, but honestly, it just finished like yesterday or the day before, so I can't really answer that. But that's really it is a really interesting question. One thing that we have found in general though is that people have no idea how much they spend on gasoline or maintenance. They just spend, and it is what it is. They know it's a lot. Oh God, I just paid $90 at the pump. But like just adding it up and understanding how much they drive in general, numeracy is like increasingly not a strong point of Americans, and so they do have a difficulty with that, and so even, and so that goes in. Well, would like those free energy, yeah, that might be really important or not. It's tough to say. But just general, like people's default thing is, oh, I can never afford an EV. That's kind of like like the first thing that they ever think about. Yeah, so, but yeah, interesting question.
Well, I get answered or asked that a lot. Julia gets me up every first Sunday or every first Saturday of the month at 6 o'clock in the morning to drive a half an hour, 45 minutes to a car show.
Mhm.
But but that's one of the questions that I get asked a lot, on buying an electric car. They're so expensive. And yet I don't know why I'm on cars.com's hit list, but a couple of weeks ago I got a message from them that there were 25 Model S's, because that's what I have, for sale in the Denver area within a 50-mile radius of my house. So I went a little deeper. There were 497 EVs for sale, all different kinds. I mean, you could get into a used Leaf for $9,000. And I keep telling people, go look at the used market. If you don't want to spend the big bucks for a Tesla, and there are no cheap used Teslas. They're just, they don't fall in that category. But I mean, there are the i3s, there are the Leafs, there are all kinds of things that are out there that are a whole lot cheaper.
Yeah, no,
So,
definitely. Yeah, but even like but that finding like that I showed you though, but yeah, for those big drivers, it really is. In some ways, it's better to get a new one, because then you got you have a maintenance. Well, I mean, even an older EV still is light on maintenance, but still, but then you have a brand new asset. You can drive for 10 years, and it's just yeah, it's really good. But yeah, the used EVs are also really good. Although right now they're so they're still pretty tight. The market is still pretty tight for them, at least in my area. Like they're still pretty relatively hard to get.
well, where the price of gas is up,
Yeah.
That the dealers see that and they're putting their big markups on them. So, I mean, if you're trying to buy a used one, maybe if you go in and negotiate, they will, but their sticker price is high. So, but I mean, I'm seeing more and more EVs and and hybrid cars. One of our members, sure, Dave Hawkins, just bought a new Ford Maverick pickup. And it's a hybrid. I've never seen a Maverick pickup. But he says he gets 37 miles to the gallon out of the hybrid. So, and that was his first tank of gas. So you got to break them in, but still in all. Hi,
So
Susan.
Matthew,
Hi.
oh, sorry.
I was going to just jump in and ask a quick question. Thank you for this presentation, and thanks, Julia, for letting me know about it. I was surprised that the maintenance costs were so high on the EVs. I've got a 2015 Leaf, and I don't think I spend that on an annual basis. So how is that? How do you come up with that number?
All right, so that is from the AAA. They do a maintenance survey. Now, and the thing is, it's true, you do need to spend money on tires, maybe brakes, I mean, obviously there are EV expenses. It does seem, like, in my view, kind of on the high side. I don't know, also, like, I don't know how much visibility, like, are they saying, well, your battery is going to die after 10 years, so you have to pay a little bit, like sinking fund type idea into it? I'm not totally sure of all the elements, and I'm not sure that they're totally transparent as to what they are. But yeah, they said it was like 6 cents per mile for an EV. But also the AAA's numbers, they say it's about 10 cents a mile for a gas car, but they only look at the first 75,000 miles. And after 75,000 miles, that's when the expenses of a gas car really start to climb. And so, yeah, I would agree, like, it seems a little counterintuitive, and I don't have a great explanation for exactly how they got there. And there's, yeah, I mean, things like wipers and, all kinds of like little stuff that, yeah.
Car washes, maybe?
I don't think car wash counts,
Not
but
maintenance.
Yeah, but
also,
they may have done that.
and I don't know how big a driver you are either, but like do you drive like 25,000 a year?
I'm not a super user. No.
Yeah,
So that would be part of it.
yeah, if you keep it really light, then yeah,
Yeah.
you
It's more like 5,000 a year.
Yeah.
Well, I have a question. What do you consider battery life? Is that based upon a time, or is that based on mileage? I realize that you can't make a hard and fast rule, but when you buy a used vehicle, you got to look at when that battery dies, when you look at the price of the used car. Or
Yeah.
what a new battery is going to cost at the end of the life of the battery.
Yeah, I think that's an area where there's like a really lack of knowledge, just because we haven't had the experience of these vehicles in the field, especially the newer generation of battery chemistry. I mean, the Teslas, my understanding is that like 10-year-old Teslas have roughly 85-90% of their battery life compared to original.
They still have 85%, or they have
Yeah,
used up 85%.
No, they still have like 85-90%, I think, after 10 years and kind of normal driving. But I'm not an expert in that area. And then yeah, I say the battery chemistries are changing all the time, and so what was true for a 2013 Leaf is not true for a 2022 Ioniq 5 or something. So it's gonna it's gonna take some time for us to really understand that, I think.
So Matt, I'm Matthew. So I'm kind of a guilty here in that I've got 2 EVs and my son's now in college, and I don't even drive much at all. But I think because of this whole super user thing that I was talking about, I've been putting my Leaf on Turo. It's out right now. So I was just thinking, it seems like, first of all, it seems like one high mileage kind of situation would be people who do ride share, or they Turo their cars out, or companies like Hertz or whatever. I know they're getting EVs, but but those would be, you know, situations that could be looked at kind of separately. Or maybe even like giving people like some kind of tax incentive or something to rent their EVs out, if, you know, I don't know.
Yeah, well, it's definitely the case that, and I mean, EV should be driven a lot. And I mean, ideally, like that's, you know, because you know, from an environmentalist standpoint, the purpose of an EV is to displace gasoline. I mean, there's a lot of different standpoints from, you know, just a driver, it's a great car, et cetera, et cetera. But from my standpoint, that's what I really like to see. And so, you know, however it can do that, displace as much gasoline as possible, that's excellent. And, you know, so that's why I have a little bit of a bone to pick with some of the legislation. Like, for example, you know, like Congress, I mean, it was generally good, and, you know, not that I have a big problem, but like the $7,500 tax credit for EVs, well, you know, a lot of that is probably going to be spent on, you know, fairly affluent people, maybe retirees, you know, just to pick on one group, but that you know, drive their F-150 Lightning pickup 15 miles, or, you know, say 75 miles a week, you know, which so basically displaces no gasoline, but they get a big tax exemption. And, you know, especially when the vehicle is in short supply, like the F-150. So then they're, you know, some ways they're kind of like taking it away from someone who could be utilizing it to, you know, save, you know, who's driving, you know, 2,500 miles a month. And so, you know, that's not ideal. So what we're proposing from a policy standpoint is to incentivize gasoline displacement. So we can calculate pretty easily how much gasoline someone's using, and just with their odometer readings. And so let's say someone is using 1,000 gallons a year, we could, instead of just offering a flat EV incentive of $7,500, we could say, look, we'll pay you $8 per gallon displaced annually. So if you're using 1,000 gallons, you would get an $8,000 award, or 10,000 or something, $10 per gallon. And then, but someone that's just using a little bit, is only using 100 gallons a year, they would get, you know, $800 or $1,000. So they would get a smaller incentive. So you would really kind of like target the incentives towards the biggest users. So that's one of our key policy goals, is to make that shift.
So how could we encourage manufacturers to move their EVs beyond just 5-passenger sedans? We just bought a Toyota Sienna, and the only option available is a regular hybrid that doesn't even have a plug-in hybrid option.
Yeah.
Well, isn't Toyota kind of dragging their feet on EVs anyway?
Well, yeah, Toyota's kind of
Yeah, they are
a special case, I guess, but there's like the only minivan available that's a plug-in hybrid is the Chrysler. I'm not a fan of Chrysler, so.
Yeah, well, you know, I guess I would say that there has been a huge amount of progress made in the pickup and SUV categories in the last couple of years. So, you know, minivans is actually a pretty small section of the market now. It used to be a lot bigger, but now it's, you know, I think I showed you it's like 7%. And now I think it's like just, you know, it's just like probably under 5% of the market. So it's kind of a niche vehicle right now.
Yeah.
And so they are going more for the, you know, like the SUVs now. There's going to be pretty good product options in all the SUV categories, which, like, I'm not totally like, why did you even choose like between the SUV, like one of these big SUVs and a minivan? Is there like, it seems like the mini market's kind of
Also,
moving.
my wife wants to be able to haul a bunch of kids around, so.
Yeah. Although, I mean, there's a lot of 7-passenger SUVs around too. So it's like, they've almost kind of.
And then, I mean, comparing like we have a Honda Odyssey right now. We're still waiting for the Sienna to show up, but it doesn't even compare to something like a Tahoe, where it's so big to drive and stuff. And the minivan has a lot more cargo space in the back than an SUV. So
Yeah.
like the smaller 7-passenger SUVs, they might be able to flip up the back seats, but then you don't have any cargo room in the back. Whereas with like the Odyssey, we have 8 passengers and still fill up the back with cargo.
Yeah, that's true. It is definitely bigger. So yeah, anyway, so that I would say that that's probably like that category is probably going to be the, in general kind of slow. I guess the VW ID, what's it called? The ID Buzz or something, right? They're coming out with a I don't know, is that a minivan? I guess it's pretty much a minivan, right? It's a van.
I think so.
Yeah.
I think it's kind of small from what I've seen. But
Yeah, so that may be I think and I think they're releasing in Europe. I think it may be take an extra year to get over here. But I think that's going to be a pretty popular car.
The RS1 from Rivian is a real neat looking vehicle. I mean, it looks like to me, it looks like an old, sure, now I'm not going to come up with it. That international thing that they had, that was a Chevy carryall, if you go way back. But they had one of them. They brought two last month to the car show, and one was a 3-seat and the other was a 4-seat. So, or 4-row.
I haven't
Pretty
seen
impressive.
the R1S in person yet.
Yeah.
Coworker has a R1T, but I do like the R1S, but
Yeah.
I haven't seen one in person yet.
These are kind of fun. Have you guys seen these ones? The canoe. So these are just coming into production, I think, this year. They're mostly, I think, going to be used for commercial. But yeah, like delivery vehicles and stuff. And I think, yeah, Ford Transit also has an EV that is starting to make sales. So I think they're kind of like a little bit moving a little bit more in the commercial area first, but yeah, anyway, but yeah, so there's definitely progress in that area though.
Well, I would think that Dodge should really be going after Amazon Prime, because God, I'm seeing Dodge Amazon vans all over town. And if they went electrified, I would think, if it's as great as it is, I would think they could save a wad.
Well, I think
Rivian's got that deal.
yeah. I mean, Amazon has, I think that, if I'm not mistaken, they made a commitment that like, is it 100% of their delivery fleet is going to be EV by 2030? I think I've seen that. So, there's going to be a big shift there for sure. And you're right. And those guys drive a lot of miles, and they have these big Sprinter vans that use a lot of gas. And so, that'll be a big step forward.
Amazon's been pushing into hydrogen too, with their warehouse vehicles and stuff.
Yeah, all you need is a hydrogen station. Hello. Yeah. Come on, Scott. What do you do with your Toyota hydrogen car? It sits on a trailer. If they bring it to a car show, it's brought on a trailer because there's no place to get hydrogen.
Well, the one I've driven, we have a fueling station on site, but it's not open to the public.
Right.
But I've driven it to car shows before. I had it out at the electric vehicle roundup over at Golden Real Estate. That was pre-pandemic, but
you have to have your Hindenburg follow you.
now you are not helping with those kind of myths.
I'm not saying anything about fires or anything. I'm just saying you need a large quantity.
Well, the Mirai, I think, has a range of about 400 miles. So there's just no infrastructure for hydrogen right now. I think it's probably about 20 or 30 years out, but we'll start seeing it.
Yeah, well, definitely in the heavy duty market, I think there's pretty substantial interest, but not, I think light duty vehicles, like that ship has kind of sailed. And Toyota, yeah, I don't know, Toyota's still kind of going around in circles, but it looks like, they're starting to get with the EV thing a little bit.
Well, I think that the table will turn when Tesla shoves out their semis and people see electric semis on the road. Nikola has semis on the road already. I'm seeing from Southern Cal Tesla talking about seeing them and showing pictures. And they had a ribbon cutting here, but I guess I don't pay attention, or I don't get out on the highway. That's someplace I don't drive. But I'm not seeing any Nikola trucks on the road. But I know that there's a dealer or there's a fleet of them out here someplace in Denver or around Denver.
So Tesla's having its, I don't know, a semi event where they deliver their first semis, I think. I think it's December 1st. So a few weeks.
Right. Yeah, no, they're planning to roll their trucks out on December 1st. And again, I'm watching a Tesla group that I belong to in the San Joaquin Valley, which is where Los Banos is. You talked about, Matt. I also saw that Tesla is opening a 42 car or 45 car charging station in a place called Santanella, which is on I-5, where Los Banos is just off of I-5. And I mean, it's a wide spot in the road.
By the way, I thought I might, before we sign off here, there were a few questions in the chat that I thought I might respond to.
Okay.
John asked, does this population reflect consumers or industry as well? So that, what I showed earlier, that was consumers. But in California, actually, we do have statistics for government, rental, and commercial vehicles. And the commercial vehicles definitely, like they have, like a lot of people using over 1,000 gallons. So there's a lot of super users there. What's particularly interesting is like government vehicles. Government vehicles, like they have the top 10% of government vehicles use like 2,000 gallons a year. Those are a lot of times there's police cars that just are on the road all the time. But the government also has lots and lots of vehicles that aren't even using 100 gallons a year, that are barely driven. So like 25% of government vehicles use, roughly, and this is my memory, they use like fewer than 100 gallons a year. And so that's kind of interesting. And then rental vehicles also are driven a lot, especially at the high end. So we do have that data, but the data that I showed you was just for commercial. There's someone said about the energy workshop at Wisconsin. Yeah, I'd be happy to present there, or one of us would. Clean Cities Coalition. Yeah, so we have in Washington State, we've been talking to that Clean Cities Coalition. I don't know if there's like a national group of clean cities. I'm sure there is, but we haven't connected with them yet, although I'd certainly like to. That would be excellent. We actually are talking with people in the federal government, the Department of Energy and Department of Transportation, because they're putting out vast amounts of dollars right now for EV infrastructure, other EV related activity. So we're trying to get the super users concept incorporated so that special attention is given to moving these biggest users over to EVs. Let's see, is there anything else? No, I guess that was it.
This is Werner Carlson. I've got places to go. Thank you very much,
Okay.
Matthew.
Okay. All right. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, thank you. This was really interesting and a nice new perspective on the switch. But I think Clean Cities is a great resource for funding and also for getting the word out. It's part of their mission. And then NRail also has people that would probably be willing to collaborate.
Yeah, no, they do a lot of excellent research, and we use some of their reports, and we've been in contact a little bit with their scientists. But yeah, that's really interesting. But yeah, the idea of connecting with the national clean cities, like, yeah, we should look into that a little more.
Yeah, Mike, I would suggest, if you are interested in participating at the Energy Fair in Wisconsin, that you contact them and get the particulars on how to conduct a workshop. I don't think that's any cost to you, They have booths there, which probably there is a fee if you set up a tent. You know. But the Energy Fair is like 32 years, 33 years in running. So it's a big organization here in the Midwest.
Okay. All right. That's interesting. Thank you. Julia, you're muted.
I'm trying to get speakers for next year. And so if anyone has any suggestions, give me an email. I mean, one area that I think would be really interesting that I've been trying and kind of failing at is electric vehicles that are not cars. So, you know, whatever, e-planes, eVTOLs, scooters, motorcycles, whatever. I think that that would be an interesting area. So if anyone knows, has any connections anywhere, or just any ideas of speakers that you think would be good, send me an email.
What's your email, Julia?
Oh, I'll put it in chat.
Actually, you guys, I gotta go too. So, but anyway, thanks so much for giving me this opportunity to speak. And I guess it's the second year in a row. So maybe next year I'll have some better data on Colorado to share. I hope I will. But yeah, but thanks again, and yeah, good luck with all that you're doing.
Yeah, that was a good presentation, Matthew. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Matt.
Okay, thanks. Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks. That.
Well, I guess I'll turn off the recording and we'll call that quits.